Hello, hello, hello. A very good evening and welcome to the Darren Grimes Show on Reasoned UK. If you didn't know that was the name already, there it is behind me in its LED glory. Well, there's lots of news to chew through today. I mean, my word, where do we even begin? Chloe's just done a video on it, but I want to give you my take on what came out of Westminster Council today. Where the council, which is, let's be honest, one of the wealthiest areas in the country. It's obviously the seat of power. It's where the Palace of Westminster resides, alongside a slew of other really fancy, nice buildings, and council tax rates no doubt raise a pretty penny. And they decided that actually they want to advertise social housing. You might think, well, fair enough, Darren, people still need to live and work in Westminster, don't they? Even if they can't afford the rent, which it's pretty easy not to be able to afford the rent in the city of Westminster. But they decided actually they wanted to advertise it to every bugger else apart from British citizens. And by that I mean they decided that actually they would advertise in Arabic, French, and a couple of other languages too. Now, to me, this goes to the very heart of the problem, which is pretty damn simple. The prioritisation of foreign nationals over British citizens continues apace under this government. There is no way in hell that, if you ask me, this ought to be happening. Where when you have a chronic housing shortage, that's my face, when you have a chronic housing shortage, they would prioritise foreigners over Brits.
We're changing the way we allocate social housing in Westminster.
Not for you. Suck it up, buttercup. So here we are, it advertises Arabic.
نهدف إلى جعل طريقة العمل أكثر شفافية ومساعدة الأشخاص الأكثر احتياجا. وقد
And I have no idea what that is. Is it Bengali? I have no idea. Not a clue. Probably resides in Whitechapel. And then, of course, there's Spanish, and that's Francais. So, look, you get, what, all of 2 seconds in a bit of English there, then you get every other bloody language. You're talking about social housing. This is British social housing with an incredibly limited stock of said housing. But a lot of people, you know, single mothers, pensioners looking to downsize, whatever it might be, people are trapped under chronic housing shortages. So this was called out. They said, yeah, we're updating the housing allocation scheme. Watch the video to hear from our Cabinet Member for Housing Services, Councillor Lisa Begum. Begum. We know a Begum, don't we? And hear staff translations in Arabic. Oh, it is Bengali. I forgive my ignorance. It's Bengali. Although, you know, maybe I don't have to know that. Maybe I shouldn't have to. And translations in that Spanish and French as well. And then they deleted it after people kicked up a fuss. I might have been one of them, but people kicked up a fuss and they've deleted the post. But the housing scheme, I bet you my bottom dollar, will go ahead unaltered. There will be a prioritisation of everyone other than you British plebs paying your taxes. I want my taxes, and bloody hell, when I look at my GB News slip, I think, my God, I'm paying over this for what? 5 billion quid in asylum costs? So you're taking the mick? And you look at the way in which British nationals are pushed to one side, and I feel sick to the pit of my stomach. You know, this isn't the country that our ancestors fought and died for. This isn't the inheritance that we were passed down that we're supposed to protect. We've become an international welfare state. You know, the NHS is the International Health Service. Social housing is international social housing. We are basically a glorified airport for foreign nationals to come and enjoy and reap the rewards and spoils of the hard work of British generosity. Well, that generosity is wearing thin. I don't know about you, but I am sick and tired, sick to the pit of my stomach, of being told, well, we've got to remember Britain is a generous nation. There's a fine line between being a generous nation and being taken for a complete and utter mug. And that's what we are, an international mug, an international laughingstock, an international outlier in almost every regard when it comes to the prioritisation and the advancement of other cultures than our own. And I'm sick of it. I'm at my wit's bloody end. Good evening, everybody who's just joining us tonight. That's my take anyway on that particular issue. And as I say, Chloe's released a video on that tonight. But let me know what you think as well. I think it's damn disgraceful. I really do. I really, really do. Right, okay, let's see who's in the grotto tonight. Probably no surprises, but you never know. One of them might become trans or something. Who knows? Let's have a look, shall we? Oh, Chloe, you've just reminded me I'm not wearing a bloody hat. Oh,
Come on, Darren.
I'll have to go get it. I'll have to go get it. Hold the thought. Whilst I get my hat, Alex, explain what you think about this story.
What a way to start the show, guys.
I know.
I mean, look, it's no surprise, is it really? Because London has changed, not for the better, but beyond belief. I would put a tweet out the other day. I'm a born and bred Londoner. I'm from a place called Harrow in northwest London. And Harrow has seen a higher population growth, as they like to call it, greater than anywhere in London, greater than the average of London in total. And I put a tweet out yesterday, and it's because they've had to install knife-detecting arches at the local shopping centre. And I got into a spat with a few people about this because they said, oh, well, not all immigrants commit knife crime. Well, obviously not all immigrants commits knife crime, but clearly the rise in population, which is attributed only to immigration, and all the new cultures that have been brought into the area are not all contributing positively. So I'm not surprised in many respects to see this story now, because our country has to cater, as you said, Darren, it's the airport of the world. Everybody is now given priority here over British citizens. I can't afford to buy a home in Harrow. Mass immigration has put the prices through the roof. I can't afford to live in my hometown. Not that I'd want to anymore, but that's where we're at, Darren. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, Younes, the Arabic is an obvious sign of the kind of person who is applying for social housing in that part of the world, Westminster.
Yeah, well, look, the big problem with asylum seekers, especially those that come from the third world countries, when they come to this country, A, they don't speak English. B, they probably don't have any assets. They don't have any money. And that's why they end up on the welfare program and they get free housing. So that's why we should stop illegal migration and just immigration in general from third world countries. Like, look at what Dubai done. The reason why Dubai does so well is because they bring the wealthiest people that can come and invest their money, right? And if you don't house these people, then you have the problem of what's happening in America, for example, in San Francisco. Then you're going to have a load of homeless people everywhere. So you either have to house them or you're going to have the same problem that America has. I think Britain is doing the right thing, housing these people. However, they shouldn't be here in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they're here, like the last thing I want is to see what we've seen most recently in Park Lane, for example, where there have been migrant tents pop up. I don't want to see London turn into San Francisco, in which you have people shitting and taking drugs on the street, living in tents and all the rest of it. Not that we don't have a housing problem in Britain, but it's pronounced there by a factor of 10, mainly because of the fentanyl addiction, the opioid addiction. And I don't want to see us regress that far. So certainly I'm not suggesting that we don't house people, but we just need to stop people allowing people to come here, because we simply don't have the capacity.
Well, we
and I'm
should
getting a
raise
bit tired of
It
saying
raises
that.
rent as well for everyone else. So not only we're
Yes,
paying our
exactly. That's
taxes,
true.
it raises the rents, it raises the house prices. So it's not a good
I
thing.
don't
It's
agree we
gone
should
up
be
every
housing
year. It goes
people.
up by 20%, I think.
Send them home. Send them back.
Well,
Send them back. We shouldn't be housing illegal migrants.
Darren, you said there you're not advocating not housing people, but the reality is, right, is that this policy of giving what is now 48% of social homes in London to foreign nationals does mean that we are not housing people, right? We've got Brits who are having to be on the streets because half the houses have been given to people who have come to this country from somewhere else, right? Okay, and first of all, before we even get onto the language thing, the fact that we are giving such a huge amount of social housing to people who have come here from another country when we have got an absolutely appalling waiting list with Brits themselves waiting is just absolutely appalling. But then to be giving social housing to people who are not even making the effort to learn the language, which is, of course, like the first prerequisite to being able to integrate in our society, contribute to our economy, work in our economy. I mean, I just think that is a huge slap in the face. I was looking at some of the stats earlier, and it's terrifying. So the average wait time for a social house is 5.5 years. For a 4-bed, if you need a 4-bed property, the wait time is 19. It's 19 years. Who the hell has 19 years to wait? You've got 1.3 million households waiting for social housing on the list, and for every one social house that is brought to the market, 6 households are declared homeless. Right, so we're going at a sixth of the speed in terms of building and providing these homes as we need them. How on earth can you justify giving houses to people who have come here from another country, who was very kind of us to just give them a visa to come and live in this country, let alone allow them to sponge off our taxpayers? It's just unbelievable.
No, it is. Well said. Well said. I mean, someone's just commented there saying that London doesn't represent the UK. If you go further north and from a few enclaves, it's more representative of the Britain of old. I think that's right, but Operation Scatter is taking effect right now, and Operation Scatter was announced. It was publicised in the Times, and that was the Labour programme of sending illegals around, dispersing them away from migrant hotels and RAF bases, and instead, or the Bibi Stockholm, and instead sending them to all around the country so they had their fair share. So I'm afraid that this problem is coming to other areas, and that actually everywhere else will just end up as shit as London is ending up.
Yeah.
Well, Angela Wayne says that we all need to take our fair share in all parts of the country. And she'll probably changing the priority list to make sure that people who have come here illegally are absolute top of the list for social housing, and the Brits can wait even longer than 5.5 years on the queue for housing. Terrorists as well, of course. She doesn't want to ban
Annie
them.
says not just London.
Housing.
I know a lady with 4 children, and she got put in one room, bed sit with them all.
Oh my God. It's awful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just a warning, because Chloe's right. I mean, don't forget, Labour dropped the proposed Tory law to prioritise British citizens for social housing.
Mm-hmm.
So that is going to happen, where you are going to get potential. And I put a tweet out, quite obviously humorous. It was meant to be digging fun at Angela Rayner. It was her holding up a sign saying "Free house for terrorists," because you might actually find yourself on a list behind a terrorist. That's totally, I'm not saying it's happened, but it's totally plausible under our system now that a terrorist might be seen as having greater need than you. And I just can't believe we're discussing this. And to go back to the point about, of what the previous comment was saying about, go further past London, you'll see that it's not representative of the country. It's not representative of the country now. Where I was born in Northwest London, Harrow, 33 years ago, was a majority white. I think there was 70% white. The white population in Harrow is now 36%. It's 36%.
Wow.
And over 47% of the people living in Harrow do not identify as being born in England. So
Mm.
this is what's happening, and it's not just going to happen to Harrow, it's going to branch further and further and further out, as you guys have noted. And the reason why I've been so vocal about this is because I have seen my own hometown destroyed. It's one of the reasons that probably made me wake up and go, I need to start speaking up about this because I don't want this to happen to the entire country. And I'm not saying all immigrants are bad. My stepfather's an immigrant. He's a great man. But there is a lot of cultures coming to this country that have no love for us. They hate our way of life, and they will destroy your towns and cities wherever they go.
Yeah, and Younes, I mean, you'll know as well, the Hamas, one of the Hamas leaders who came over to Britain, he was able to buy his council house under right to buy. So he made a mint out of owning this property that's in London. You know, the inflation of house prices has gone through the roof, for want of a better metaphor. And, you know, the fact of the matter is we have enabled a proponent of terror, a proselytizer of terror, to benefit financially. We are a joke. Would Dubai do that? I don't think they bloody well would.
No, and also they housed some previous IRGC members in Harrow
That's
as
the
well,
Iranians.
which I found astounding. And I think the guy was, in the 1980s, he was responsible for thousands of hangings in Iran, like political prisoners, and then somehow he managed to escape Iran. Then came here and got social housing. And also another thing that you have to remember is that these asylum seekers and these immigrants, they get priority because it's a point-based system. So if you're like a single Pakistani mom with 4 children and 2 of your children are disabled because, you know, you done incest, you married your cousin or something, then all of a sudden you get priority because you have 2 disabled children, you're a single mother. So if you're a healthy British person, then you're way at the back of the queue where everyone else gets priority over you.
Right, before we
And
get
the
on our...
reality is people who are the least able to financially support their children who have the most of them. I mean, you go to, you know, you'll go to slums where people don't even have a dime to buy a potato, yet they've got like 8, 9 kids. They just, you know, they don't have the education. They don't know about financial planning. They just don't think that way. And so, yeah, that's you may find people coming from poorer countries as a consequence are likely to have more children, and that might mean that they are pushed higher up that priority list.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a good, and that's actually, you know, I am in favour of scrapping the 2-child benefit ban because I want people to have more babies. But the opposing side of that is that, you know, there is a group that are going to have a lot of babies, and you know, it's whether or not it would actually benefit British families. You know,
It won't. Sadly, it won't. That's the reality. It won't benefit British.
Also,
I'm very on the fence about it.
Just a quick comment regarding what Alex said earlier. I actually used to live in Willesden Junction for 2 years, which is like near Harrow area. And honestly, like, it was like the worst place to rent because it was like full of social housing all around me. And it was all Somalis. I don't know where they came from. And most of them didn't even speak English. And all of them were drug dealing, like in the street. Like as soon as you walked out, you could smell the weed everywhere. And in every single corner, there was gang of these Somali guys. And it was almost dangerous. I would say it would be dangerous for a woman to walk down the street at that time. You know,
it would be.
Even as a man, you had to watch the back. And that's just Willesden Junction. That's supposed to be zone 2. And we have all these Somalis. And I think one of the reasons they do that because they probably can't get a job or don't have a job. So they end up drug dealing. And it was just a mess. And I was like, I have to move out of here. And I did after 2 years.
Yeah, and I'll just say this about social housing as well, because my firm belief on social housing is that you should only be entitled to receive social housing if, 1, you are a British citizen born here in the country, and 2, have worked and paid into the system so you are not a net loss to the taxpayer. Sometimes a combination of those would be welcome. Those should be the only conditions we should be worried about with social housing. Otherwise, if you can't live in the UK and you are made homeless, you should be deported if you're not a British citizen. That would be the case anywhere else in the world, by the way.
Absolutely. It won't be long
And
before
even if,
Londoners are telling people like me to get out. Us Northerners, chippy little Northerners, we'll be deported from London. Right, I want to move on from that topic because I want to go through a list of things that have happened to the Labour Party, because one of our comments said at the very start from Joe, I assume that's Joe. Is that Joe or I-O? How the hell do you say that? Anyway, hi Darren, do you think Starmer will last 5 years? And the answer is, I don't know, because things aren't going too good for them. So Rachel Reeves or Rachel Thieves, whatever your persuasion, has today came out with this robotic statement, they're like an AI-generated machine. And she said that the WASPy women knew this was coming. The WASPy women being the women who were born in, the 1950s. And they say a review found that they were owed up to £2,950 each. That was an independent ombudsman. And Rachel Reeves said they knew that this was coming and that they're not going to get a penny, despite the fact this is her. Look at her in this image here. I will work with WASPy to identify and deliver a fair solution for all women affected. So this is going down like a bag of sick with women born in the 1950s, and those actually that are supportive of them, who don't believe it's fair to tell people that this is what they can expect in retirement and then to change the rules. I mean, that's all well and good for the people born in the 1950s, by the way, because I think people our age aren't going to get a sudden pension. But then it's not just that, because the Chagos Islands deal that Sir Keir Starmer surrendered to Mauritius is up for, well, it's gone up in smoke, because the Mauritius Prime Minister is seeking new terms. He says that sovereignty proposals agreed under his predecessor would not produce the benefits that the nation could expect. I mean, I don't know what the hell he wants, given that we said we'd continue to pay for it despite not having ownership of it on a silver platter. I think that's probably the best bloody deal you're going to get, Sonny Jim. But then again, I could be wrong, because surrender Starmer, he'll probably want to add in Gibraltar as well, just to really sweeten the deal. I have no idea. So the British plan to cede sovereignty over Chagos, that has apparently, reportedly, according to Nigel Farage, angered the Americans, the incoming Trump administration. So there's foreign policy headache, there's the WASPy pension headache. Then you could marry that with the fact that Keir is renegotiating, surrender Starmer renegotiates EU deal. That EU deal, bad enough as it is, he wants to open it up to give them the right to fish in our waters. By the way, the English Channel, the French take more out of the English Channel than we do. And if you consider the fact that we are actually a net importer of fish, why do we not actually take enough of our own, catch of the day, enough of our own to actually sell it within Britain? We have some absolutely amazing fish in our waters, but we're surrendering them to every Tom, Dick and Harry in Europe that wants to get their net into the water and to basically reap the spoils of British produce. It doesn't make sense, but it does to him, because he just wants to be popular around the dining tables of EU homes, the leaders of EU bureaucracy, because that's what Starmer is ultimately. He is a technocrat at heart. He's not a politician. He's a technocrat that believes in process over actually selling something to a nation. He just believes in doing things because that's the right thing to do. This isn't the right thing to do. This is a surrender from the outset. And the EU, by the way, just announced that they were taking Britain to court over that deal. So we are surrendering to a conglomerate of European nations that do not wish us well. And Sir Keir Starmer, so there's another foreign policy fuck up. And then this Rohan Silva wrote in the Times about how with no Britain to challenge them, 3 hugely interventionist pieces of legislation mean Europe is falling behind on tech. So right now, we are in the age of artificial intelligence. Britain could stream itself between Europe and the United States of America to be a tech superpower. We have a real tech advantage in London, but we risk losing that if we regulate it out of existence. And if we marry ourselves back up with the EU, that's exactly what we'll be doing. At every opportunity Britain is handed that could benefit the national interest, we just say, oh, to hell with it. You know, it's more important that we're liked with the European Commission than to do anything else. So on all of those things, I'm not convinced that they are on a steady footing and that actually potentially they will come a cropper. I can see the fraying there already. If you consider that even, 40% of their own voters aren't content with the way in which this government is going, it ain't good. Mm-hmm. It ain't good, Chloe.
No, I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the video put out with alongside his Mail column, Boris's Mail column, yes, about this. And, Boris, clearly, very passionate about this, saying we have got to fight against this. Keir Starmer is giving away Brexit. I do not think we're going to literally rejoin, but he will try to make us rejoin in all but name. And it's, we were warning about this before the general election, and I think everyone just kind of, dismissed us as people scaremongering. But I think, it's clear the evidence is here with this and various other things, like when he was meeting with Ursula von der Leyen about migration and potentially agreeing to take on an extra, say, 30,000 asylum seekers each year as to be part of their sort of migration pact deal or whatever they call it. I think it's very, very scary. And the reality is, right, it's not the case that if Keir Starmer does all this stuff and takes us closer to the EU, that let's say if reform get in 2029, that it's going to be easy for them at a click of the fingers to reverse all of this stuff. I mean, how painstaking was the process of getting out of the EU? It was horrendous. They made it absolute hell to us. I mean, they were horrible bullies. It's taken us, look, guys, it's almost a decade since we voted to leave the EU, and we'd not really even properly left yet at this point. It took so long. And then to see Starmer just giving it all away, it's just absolutely heartbreaking. We've gone through so much hardship to try and make Brexit happen, and Keir Starmer is just ruining it. I'm really, really scared about this.
So, Alex, a few of our viewers are right. I nearly said viewers and listeners there. I'm so used to saying that for being on the radio. We are not on the radio, and
some people might be cooking their dinner whilst listening.
Well, they might. That's true. So Jenny says, I'm waspy, and I didn't know it until I approached 60. No memory of it in the press and no memory of a warning letter, despite paying tax my whole life. Do you think that this argument that they knew about it all along actually holds water? And I guess ultimately the Labour Party don't feel that they need to bank on the votes of pensioners, and therefore screwing them over is absolutely fine for them. Because, I mean, Stephen also says Starmer is a dead duck, Rachel from accounts is a non-entity. As for Rayna, she's morally bankrupt, Lammy of low intellect, and Miliband is bonkers. God, yeah, I haven't even spoken about Ed bloody Miliband. I'll be on all night. Watch out for streeting. I'm in a meeting. Yes, I think red streeting could be the next leader of the Labour Party, actually. But anyway, Alex, that was a very convoluted way of asking a question, which is, do you think actually they're going to sneak out of it unscathed? Oh, Alex, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can.
Sorry,
yes.
guys.
No.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. No, I was just saying, I think Labour's getting its comeuppance now in the press. The reality is that people aren't stupid, and the government is liable to tell people when things like their pension changes, and they're very, very effective at communicating with employees when their tax bands change. I mean, it will just happen overnight. When you're going to get taxed more, it will just happen in your payslip. This is a pension scandal, and the government are trying to brush it under the carpet. And let's not forget, Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, Liz Kendall, all these cabinet ministers now were out protesting with the WASPy women just a couple of years ago. Just 2 years ago. This is while Keir Starmer was elected party leader. This wasn't like 2017. This has been going on for years. So they knew the problem existed. They defended those women and said, no, you're right. You need justice. We will deliver it for you when we're in government. Now they don't want to spend the money. The reality is they don't want to spend the money because these are British citizens. They're happy to fork it
That's
out.
a good point.
£22 billion for unscientifically proven carbon capture, hundreds of millions or tens of millions for foreign farmers, billions for Ukraine. Everyone else is getting a piece of the pie apart from British people. Pensioners, another group of people who have been completely slammed by this government. So let's not be under any illusion when they say there's no money left. Well, there's no money left where their political ideology sits. And there was an MP on GB News today, and she says we must invest, and these are her words, where Labour's values lie. And clearly, we know, as this channel, we've been saying this for a long time, Labour's values do not lie with the British people.
Damn right. Younes, I mean, do you think that actually that can you imagine them coming back from this? Can you imagine them managing to win the hearts and minds of the British public?
No, I don't think so at all. And Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are just a dying breed of globalist World Economic Forum puppets. And the reason why they try to get us back into these institutions is because they want a globalist state. They want it, but then I think European Union, United Nations, all these international institutions have become obsolete. And now we have a rise with, populist movements such as the Reform Party and also Donald Trump in America. I really do think the tide is turning, and this is a battle between the establishment and the populist movement that is going on. And all of this connects to that. The bigger picture is that we have a bunch of elitists, someone like Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is about to resign, but he's also another globalist puppet. But even in Canada, they were trying to get rid of him and then bring this other guy. I think his name is Polier or something. All over the world, we have this common theme of this battle between the establishment and the populace. And I'm really optimistic about the future because I think people are waking up to this. And I think Reform Party, Donald Trump, and all these kind of parties are going to end up winning over time.
Yeah, well, on that point then, that is a very neat segue into tonight's big interview. So well done. You teed that up beautifully. And I didn't even have to slip you a fiver. So the big interview tonight is with Patrick O'Flynn, and Patrick discusses what happened on the BBC panel last night, the furore in response to Elon Musk potentially making a donation to the Reform Party, the Electoral Commission, who people that have followed me online for a little while will know of my history with the Electoral Commission. We go way back. And I mean, Chloe just said there that it's almost been a decade since Brexit. Well, over that period, I was fighting a court case against the Electoral Commission, so I know them pretty well. They've got involved, and they are more bent than an iron bob note. I'll tell you that much for free. And they are basically saying that they have an issue and they want the law changed over Elon Musk's plan to donate to Reform UK. They didn't say that about George Soros when he was trying to stop Brexit, did they? But anyway, we're going to get on. Hold your thoughts on that issue because we will come back to it. But I will get into the hot seat where Patrick O'Flynn awaits. Joining me now is Patrick O'Flynn, former UKIP MEP and the sharp mind behind State of the Nation on Substack. There's plenty of material to be going on there if you're talking about the state of this nation at the moment. It's a must-read for anyone keeping tabs on Britain's ever-shifting political tides. With Reform UK now, of course, past 20% in the polls, my friends, that's a political tide that's very much coming in. It's clear that they are really quite rattled, the establishment, by this unforeseen event. Nigel Farage, his rumoured links to Elon Musk, he was with him at Mar-a-Lago on Monday of this week, they've only added to that panic, as critics rush to paint reform as a dangerous force in British politics. You had former Labour Mother of the House, Harriet Harman, saying just that, and of course an acting leader of the Labour Party. But what does this all mean for the future of the electoral landscape and the two-party system? Patrick's the man to help us unpack it all. Could this Elon Musk reform axis, could this be the next seismic shift in Britain's political landscape? And what does it say, my friends, about the appetite for real change in the country? Is Elon Musk, tech titan, genius of a man, the right man to ally himself with a party like Reform to bring about change in a country such as Britain? Well, Patrick O'Flynn joins me now. Patrick, thank you very much for your company.
Good afternoon, Darren.
Patrick, on that point, Elon Musk himself, I mean, you're an SDP man these days. Are you sort of put off by the idea of a tech titan coming across to Britain and trying to help us out?
No, I'm not put off at all. I mean, I'm a member of the SDP, not particularly an active one, because I approve of their values, and I think they've been the very best party standing up against woke, against mass migration, and I hope to see them prosper. But I also understand that at the moment, the party that's in pole position to smash the establishment cartel is very much Reform UK. And just having Elon Musk interested in it, I think is a masterstroke from Nigel Farage, who, you know, he's a much more seasoned party leader, Nigel is, than the other party leaders who are fairly kind of new to politics even. And I think you're seeing the difference. So Elon Musk is a name which is very sexy to younger voters. He's very on trend or on the zeitgeist, to use that phrase. And just seeing Nigel in that photograph with him, having met him, having talked about money, that's a really high profile event, whether or not the enormous sum of money mentioned follows. If it does follow, that clearly, you know, even if it's a tenth of the $100 million, that's enough to drastically equalise the playing field that Reform's playing on as regards the Tories and Labour, or potentially, if it's the full amount, to make them the financial kingpins. And I think it's a terrible problem for the establishment parties if they're seen to kind of rewrite the rules to block this money. Then again, they're just behaving like a cartel, and it looks like they haven't got the arguments to defeat the Reform challenge.
And Patrick, on that point, why did the establishment never have an issue? I can remember, and you were obviously a big Brexiteer yourself, I remember it well. I can remember chronicling when I worked at Brexit Central, actually going through and chronicling what happened during those post-Brexit years. The immediate aftermath, George Soros was heavily involved in funding outfits that he wanted to stop Brexit. Now, if that isn't election interference or interference in democracy, I don't know what is. So are the establishment being incredibly selective in their outrage?
Oh, they definitely are. And I think another aspect of that is, you may have seen Harriet Harman complaining on television at the weekend that Reform were actually a threat to democracy by standing in elections, giving people more policy choice, more ideas to back or not back. What she obviously meant was that they're a threat to the cartel that's failed the British public. So, you know, I think that Nigel Farage is going to have a really big year in 2025. The Elon Musk money issue. I think that's just one thing that terrifies the establishment. But I think even if Elon Musk doesn't come through with most of that money, just seeing the new Trump administration get going in America, start cutting taxes, start particularly expelling illegal immigrants. You know, we've already seen Meloni in power in Italy. We saw Wilders win the elections in the Netherlands. You know, everyone expects Le Pen's party to do very well. Perhaps she even becomes the next president of France. The AfD has a crack at coming second, potentially, in Germany in February. All across the Western world, this issue of border control and breaking free of these globalist compacts which prevent countries protecting themselves from the scourge of mass illegal immigration. That's becoming, you know, a really existential issue, and none of the establishment parties in our country are willing to grasp the nettle on that. And I think people look at Nigel Farage and think, well, this guy has got a quarter of a century of credibility warning about excessive immigration, and actually the more the establishment figures scream and holler about him, it almost enhances his attraction to a lot of voters.
Indeed. Let's have a little watch of a video that took place last night on BBC Newsnight, in which Lewis Goodall, who used to work for the BBC, but he left the BBC to go join a global podcast alongside Emily Thornberry, I almost said there, Emily Maitlis, and I bet she listens to it though, Patrick, and John Sopel, who was also at the BBC. But this is what Lewis Goodall, had to say about the Elon Musk in the most sneering fashion it has to be said.
Lewis, what is Nigel Farage's strategy? What is Elon Musk doing as well? Why is he so interested in Britain?
It's a very intriguing question, Victoria. Look, I think British politics is asleep at the moment about this. I think that this is going to be whatever happens in 2029, assuming the general election. That's an eon away. But I don't think that there is any doubt that reform and the rise of reform, and there will be people watching this who get very angry when people like me say this, but it is going to be one of the dominant themes of our politics next year. And that is because clearly it's part of an international context, which we're seeing populist forces, particularly on the populist right, doing extremely well throughout Europe. There's no reason to suggest that Britain will be immune to that. We can see that Reform are doing better and better in the opinion polls. And I think the Musk connection is central. And I'm amazed, actually, in conversations with certainly the government, although I must say not Labour MPs, that many ministers feel asleep to me about the potential vulnerability that there is in the British political system. Why do I say that? Because both our electoral law and the law governing donations, and particularly the online space in Britain, is completely antiquated. The last time either were properly updated was 20 years ago. It is completely clear that if Musk wanted to, he could funnel enormous amounts of money via a UK subsidiary. And although we have election spending limits, which we do, 35 million for a big party, in the outside of the short or long campaign, he could funnel that money into online ads. He could help Reform in all sorts of organisational ways, in a way that we have never quite seen a donation like that before. And who's to say that 100 million will be the end of it? Well, I mean, to the rest of us, that's like 10 pence. It is small change to Elon Musk, and the government needs to wake up to it.
And
I mean, not quite, Patrick. That's the biggest amount of hyperbole I think I've ever seen on the BBC, and that's saying something. But I mean, this all stems, does it not, from Musk taking over X, arguably amplifying reform-like voices and giving free speech to those who would be censored by other platforms. I mean, how significant is the role of X itself in shaping insurgency movements? And is that why you think they're so rattled and angry, talking about changing electoral law to block Elon Musk's capacity to support reform?
I think X, what I still find hard not to refer to as Twitter, has been very instrumental. I mean, before Elon Musk took over X, if you entered into a debate with a militant trans person, and you wouldn't accept that that person was the gender they identified as, and if you used anything implying that you thought they were actually the biological sex they really were, you would get chucked off Twitter. the wrath of hell will be lowered upon your head. And it was the same with lots of other issues, including the immigration issue. There was a real chilling, so-called liberal left hegemony going on, which actually stopped these issues being spoken about. And many normal, ordinary people who are patriotic about their country, but not versed in the jargon of the political elite, they felt unwilling and unsure what they were allowed to say. Now, Elon Musk coming along and actually getting rid of all that kind of woke handcuffs has opened out the space, and I think it has had quite a dramatic effect, not just in America, but over here as well. We've had GB News, obviously, helping to break up the viewpoint cartel on British broadcast media too, which has had a big effect. And suddenly you're seeing this birth of social conservatism, particularly among young male voters, which is really galloping on. Nigel Farage is tearing up trees on TikTok, massively outperforming any other political leader. And it's almost like it's the end of an era. And once the peak woke, peak liberal left establishment view, comes off the peak, it's going to crash very quickly. So I think Musk taking over Twitter and turning it into X and making it much more of a free speech, even-handed platform for points of view has been really significant. And I tell you, the other thing about Elon Musk is, whatever you think of him, he is the most successful business person in the world, right? And if he is telling Britain, you're going the wrong way, a lot of people who aren't political anoraks and obsessives are going to look at that and say, well, actually, that's what I think. That's what it feels like. Nigel Farage is alongside this guy. This looks like the future to me.
Yeah. So, what extent do you think they will really clamp down on this? How far do you think they'll push it in order to block this alliance being able to take shape in any meaningful way electorally?
Well, they may try and invent new rules on donations, which will be seen specifically as trying to block reform getting access to resources, right? So if you're going to change a law for some sort of high-minded pro-democracy reason, you need to do it when there's not a kind of obvious vested interest that everyone can see smacking you in the face, So I think that the risk that the establishment parties have is they'll do themselves as much damage as anything by being seen to block a kind of new choice, new entrant in the market from getting going, that they won't succeed now because Nigel Farage has the volume and the voice and the supporters flocking to him to make a real dent in the establishment anyway, irrespective of Musk. And all those establishment figures will do is to wind up normal people against them even more. And Lewis Goodall there, he's a very bright guy. He's very astute. And he was one of the few people when he was on the BBC that kind of understood some of the momentum for Brexit. But he's very much seems to have gone whole hog in with the Emily Mate, this John Sopel, a kind of aloof Remainer elite view now. And everything he talked about there was, if you like, processology. He never got to, and the government needs to stop this, right? He never got to analysing what is it which is appealing to more and more British voters about what reform is offering. And what is it that the consensus of the last 25 years, Lib Dem, Labour, Tory, has failed to deliver. So it's about substance ultimately. Elon Musk or no Elon Musk, $100 million or no $100 million. If Nigel Farage has got the substance to win the arguments, then there'll be no stopping him next year.
I want to ask you about Kemi Badenoch in a second. But before I do that, on Nigel himself, I mean, you've known him for many years. What do you make of the criticism around him, as far as some pockets of the right are concerned, around what he said to Winston Marshall on his podcast about Islam and how the UK politically needs to recognise that Islam is growing in Britain and will therefore represent a significant electoral force. And any political party that basically says, we don't want Muslim votes, well, stands to die a death. Do you think there is merit to that argument, or do you see this as appeasement of sorts?
I wouldn't go as far as say it's appeasement. I think Nigel is, boxing clever at the moment. He also got into flack for appearing to go reasonably soft on the idea of deporting some migrants, with the implication that these would be illegal migrants, and he seemed to set his face against mass deportations. Well, what I would say is that if there are three potential prime ministers at the next election, and they're Keir Starmer, Kemi Badenoch, at the head of 50% Lib Demi Tory MPs, or Nigel with a Reform majority, my judgment is you would get much stronger policies, both on immigration control and deporting illegal immigrants and overstayers, and standing up to militant Islam and its spread across particularly our major cities. You get much stronger policies in action from a Farage-led administration than from either of the other two.
The UKIP point, having been there yourself, been there, done that, in UKIP's heyday, really, the halcyon days of 2015, what can they learn? What lessons can they learn to avoid the pitfalls that actually held UKIP back electorally, but also internally? It seemed to me to be quite a fractious, shall we say, outfit, but certainly by the end. And I'm wondering, have you any reflections on what they can do to avoid that happening? Are they making the right calls? They've got Nick Candy in as treasurer. They've got Zia Youssef as chairman. Successful guys, the pair of them. Are they already making the right foundational approaches to actually avoid the pitfalls of the past?
I think they are. And also, I think Nigel already has broadened his appeal considerably since those days of UKIP. You have to remember that UKIP was depicted by establishment media as, quote, the BNP in suits back in the day, when it began from very small beginnings, just making this at the time, unacceptable argument that we should be outside the European Union in charge of our own affairs. And the UKIP story was going from sort of 1% in the polls to 4 million votes in the 2015 election, taking enough votes primarily off the Conservatives when they were in coalition with the Lib Dems to force their hand to offer a referendum, and really, in its own terms, its own life as a party, but becoming the most successful political party of the 20th century. It had one big aim, and it's, more or less totally imperfectly, obviously, but achieved that aim. Now, since then, Nigel has very skillfully used broadcasting to get better at communication, to become less off-putting to sort of people who still see themselves as being in the cautious centre, and to broaden the brand, which he did very successfully with the pop-up one-year Brexit party to save Brexit from the clutches of Theresa May. And you'll note the sort of people he brought in as Brexit party candidates. I remember Annunziata Rees-Mogg being a bit of a masterstroke in terms of a business-orientated Tory figure to bring over more Tory voters. And I think Nigel in his GB News show has broadened out his appeal further. He's gathered authority and stature. And I think what's happening with Reform just builds on that broad direction. And that might be one reason why some of the old, true, die-hard Farage supporters might be feeling at the moment, is he slightly diluting the message? Well, I think he's broadening appeal, and they're obsessed with getting from being what they are now, which, as you said, is a 20-something% party, to becoming a 30% party, because under first past the post, always the great enemy of UKIP, the great enemy of the Brexit party, and indeed of Reform to an extent at the last election. But under first past the post, if you can be a 30% party and the other two main establishment parties are struggling on 25%, then suddenly it starts paying out seats, like a jukebox with all the symbols coming up in alignment. So they are seriously thinking of hitting 30%, seeing that Labour and the Tories might be on 23, 24, 25% each, and then winning literally scores, potentially even hundreds of three-way marginal contests in 2029. Obviously, there's the stepping stones of the local elections next year and the year after, the Senedd elections, and actually reform is starting to get traction in Scotland, and no Nigel Farage-led party ever has really had that. And I think that's a real sign of a broadening appeal and a sort of sense of dynamism behind Nigel.
Yes, music to our ears, I've no doubt. The final question I want to put to you, Patrick, is around, I think we're both probably pretty sympathetic to much of the Kemi Badenoch platform. And by that, I mean this anti-identity politics, you know, standing against that real poison of the woke mind virus that seeped through British life and institutions. And she has been, for a long time, a real staunch opponent to all of that. But I'm a bit disappointed by the Conservatives, right? They just seem to have totally left any form of opposition to reform, despite the fact reform only have 5 MPs. So what do you see as the future of the Conservative Party under Kemi's leadership? Do you think actually reform, they don't need to talk about agreements with the Tories because they're going to ride roughshod over them? Absolutely.
Well, I agree with you that I think Kemi's been very cautious in her first, whatever it is, 6-7 weeks in office. And if you look at the shadow cabinet, you've got Mel Stride as shadow chancellor and Priti Patel as shadow foreign secretary. Now Priti Patel was the Home Secretary presiding over that deliberate, letting the rocket boosters go under immigration levels, right? Lowering the earnings thresholds, relaxing rules on students, bringing independence. She was behind, no doubt at Boris Johnson's behest, this enormous escalation in legal immigration that we saw completely against their manifesto promise. And yet she's given one of the top jobs. And Mel Stride was chair of the Treasury Select Committee, cheering on the idea of lowering earnings thresholds, getting more foreign nationals in to do low-paid, low tax-paying jobs, which weren't worth it for Britain. And the language that Kemi has addressed the betrayal of the Brexit Red Wall vote by the last government, particularly on immigration, has been very mealy-mouthed and underpowered. We made mistakes. She's not even particularly saying what she intends to do about them. And then there's that video clip from 2018 showing her sort of cheering on a relaxation of some immigration rules. So I think when even Keir Starmer is taunting you in the House of Commons about being reckless on immigration levels, that's a really difficult position to be in. But having said that, I haven't given up on her. She won the leadership with this pitch: I'm an engineer, I'm going to go away and do a systematic review of how things work and come back with policies. So, if Tory MPs are sort of calm and resolute and not headless chickens, and that's a big if, then maybe Kemi will come back in 2 years' time with some genuinely impressive policies about getting a grip on our border, bringing back growth to the economy. But the danger for her is that the MPs will panic after reform cleans up in May, does even better the following year, particularly in Wales and Scotland, and then do the Tories pitch into yet another leadership election. And I think the big problem for the Conservatives is they're sort of 40 of them are Lib Dems, really. 40 of them are Conservatives, and 40 of them go whichever way the wind is blowing. So people like you and me and others who share our views, we couldn't really at the moment say we could vote Conservative with any conviction or any sense of sureness about what we would get afterwards. You could get, anything from Mel Stride to John Hayes and Robert Jenrick, and it could be any mixture of that, depending which faction of the party is in control at any one time. And when you vote reform, I think, everyone in reform wants to leave the ECHR. Everyone in reform would cut foreign aid. Everyone in reform would be tougher on crime. It's a united party. And you could argue Labour and the Lib Dems are fundamentally internally united on a lot of stuff. I mean, I happen to disagree with their positions. With the Conservatives, you don't know what you're going to get. And it seems very difficult for Kemi. She hasn't got many MPs to choose from to form a shadow cabinet, but she's doing this broad church, we're united. Well, I don't want the Conservatives to be united. I want them to be coherent, and I want to know what version of conservatism they're asking us to vote for.
And that's how they won in 2019, right? Because Dominic Cummings said, we're going to take the whip away from all of the Brexit rebels and anyone that stands in our way. And he did that. And the country said, I want this. I want to get Brexit done, as they promised, and gave them an 80-seat majority. So I agree with you. Frankly, disunited parties do not win elections, and I can't see any way of actually proving to the public that they are a united party that stands for one particular thing. They are, as you say, a hodgepodge of liberals and wets and then dry Brexiteers. It's a mess. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be fascinating to watch. And Patrick, we'll check out your Substack to chronicle all of it. So thank you very much for your time today, my friend.
It's been a pleasure, a privilege to be on the show.
Well, that was Patrick O'Flynn there offering his take on Elon Musk. I'm going to rattle through before I bring the rest of you in with your thoughts on that. I think he was absolutely spot on his analysis on the significance of Elon, who has a unique draw with young millennial, primarily men. But he has that cool factor, this tech titan, that is really a powerful driving force behind reform. And also what he said about the Conservative Party. They are two different parties in one. They are Lib Dem wets and then some all-right so-called conservatives. And it's hard to actually decide and work out which party you're going to get in government. So he was absolutely right in his analysis. But Andrew Griffith has showered praise on Elon Musk, but he has urged him to back the Conservatives also. I mean, good luck with that. That the Electoral Commission has got involved and said that this is the anti-Brexit Electoral Commission, as I said earlier, more bent than the line Bob Note, and they're saying they want law change to avoid Elon Musk being able to back a political party in Britain. That comes despite the fact George Soros gave hundreds of thousands of pounds, potentially more. He's certainly given a lot of millions over the years to various movements. To reverse Brexit. I can think of nothing more anti-democratic than that. And Labour are considering changing the law over this. They're mulling plans to limit political donations from companies owned by foreigners after the owner of Tesla and X met with Nigel Farage in Florida. And I ask you this question, where is Lord Ali domiciled for business purposes? I don't know if it's because he has a place in New York, right? I mean, where do we draw the line here? I just see this as nakedly an establishment stitch-up to avoid the power behind reform and the momentum that they can see gathering behind reform at a significant pace. They are doing everything they can to thwart that, and that's what I see here. But anyway, your thoughts, Alex, yeah?
Well, I was just going to say, just to add to that, Labour received a £4 million donation from a tax haven, a hedge fund based in the Cayman Islands. So, I mean, why and how all of a sudden have the Tories and Labour found this new morality? It's incredible. Do you know what it is? It's got nothing to do with the money, because both Labour and the Tories have been taking money from foreigners and foreign countries and foreign organisations for forever. It's about how scared they are of Elon Musk. And it's not just to do with his money. It's to do with the thought and the counsel and the strategy that will come with Elon's money. They are terrified of that, because look how well they did in America. And they don't want their little uniparty, their little power sharing agreement they've had, that every 10 to 14 years, the uniparty's different colour will take over and do the same thing the last one did. They don't want that wheel broken because it served them extremely well for the entirety of history of British politics. So no wonder why they are scared. No wonder why they want to change the rules now all of a sudden.
I agree. Younes, do you find it hypocritical that globalists like George Soros can donate money to campaigns to thwart democracy in Britain, but as soon as Elon Musk says, I think I want to put my money behind Nigel Farage, then they get their knickers in a twist?
Yeah, I mean, they're the master of projection. So everything that they do themselves, then they accuse you of doing. So it wasn't just George Soros, it was also Bill Gates and other people that they took money from. And as I said, the tide is turning and they are really scared. And this is what they do. At first, they try to cancel you. They try to demonize you. When that doesn't work, they try to go after you legally. So now they're trying to change the law so Elon Musk is not able to donate. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to work. They tried to do the same thing to Donald Trump in America, and he backfired massively. He won the House, he won the Senate, he won the popular vote, and he won the presidency. And I have a feeling something similar will happen in the UK very soon. And that's why the establishment, especially Labour and the Conservatives, they're scared, because what we are witnessing is the changing of the guard in British politics. I don't think politics will be the same after the next few years. And that can have many different reasons. But one of the main reasons is that we have social media now, we have freedom of speech platforms such as X, then we have billionaires such as Elon Musk that know what they're doing. And the mainstream media and the establishment is also dying. So platforms like us that come and speak the truth, or maybe GB News, it's all, that's a bigger picture of what's happening here. Everything is changing. Politics is changing. News is changing. Mainstream media, everything is changing for the better.
Chloe, Stephen says it doesn't matter if Starmer is running scared, reform is coming. You heard there in that BBC interview, the BBC panel stacked against Elon Musk, by the way. The fact that there is this establishment, and of course the the London BBC is just packed to the rafters with liberal lovies, right, who all vote for the Labour Party. You can see here that they are getting really quite desperate, and in that desperation, they're lashing out.
Yeah, and I think that people can see that. I don't think anybody is going to fall for the argument that this is all about fairness and this is about, stopping rich people from controlling politics. No, everyone can see that this is just the people on the left throwing their toys out the pram because they can see Keir Starmer's approval ratings absolutely plummeting, and they know that reform are coming, and they know that there's a very, very high chance that Nigel Farage is going to be the next Prime Minister. And them, in their little bubble, which, as you say, they live in, Darren, they think that is terrifying, just like how they thought that the prospect of Trump becoming president of the United States again would be terrifying, that this would be some kind of Nazi, fascist, racist in power, and we must do absolutely everything, doesn't matter what the means are, to stop it, right? And then, you saw that tactic played, the democracy line of argument that was played out by the Democrats in America, right? We had that clip from the news. Who was it? The lady speaking, saying reform is a threat to democracy.
Harriet Harman.
Yeah, there we go. Harriet Harman, right? And you had exactly the same thing in the US about Trump, right? Kamala Harris and Joe Biden saying Trump is a threat to democracy. Okay, and when you push that line of argument, that tells people it doesn't matter what the means are. You need to stop this person because else you're going to lose democracy and you're going to live under some kind of dictatorship. Okay, so you can pass these laws to stop Elon Musk from being able to donate because it's worth it to save democracy. You get into very, very dodgy territory when you make that argument. We are not the US, okay? The US does have a problem with money controlling politics. You cannot win an election in the US unless you have insane amounts of money. We have, I think, strict enough rules already in the United Kingdom, right? And if Labour genuinely were concerned about big donations, they wouldn't have, as Alex has pointed out, these taken all these money from overseas companies. They wouldn't have taken all this cash and all these freebies from Lord Ali. It is one big coincidence, right, that They've only just come up with this idea of changing the law to stop rich people from abroad from donating when it suits them and it suits their electoral prospects. Nobody is going to buy that this is just all about fairness and it's not about them trying to stop reform.
And Ben comments saying the Electoral Commission didn't investigate this donation, as in the Soros donation, and that's absolutely spot on because they are a biased regulator, and I will die. My dying breath will be to say that the Electoral Commission are a biased regulator. And listen, I just think that it's totally corrupt. I think that it's visible for all to see, and we're not going to fall for it. We're really, really not. And we're getting lots of love. Victoria says, gosh, I adore this channel. It's so refreshing to hear young people not blinded by the woke mind virus. And that's another reason why we need Elon Musk, because as Younes says many times, he is a great champion of defeating that virus. So more power to him. Right, we've got some breaking news in, and I want people to brace themselves because this is just in from the Times newspaper, and it says this: how the UK became the Western capital for Sharia courts. Muslims are increasingly turning to Britain's Sharia courts, which are not part of UK law and operate as informal bodies issuing religious rulings on marriage. So Britain, an investigation by The Times discovered that polygamy is so normalised that an app for Muslims in England and Wales to create Islamic wills has a drop-down menu for men to say how many wives they have between the number 1 and 4. The app, approved by a Sharia court, gives daughters half as much inheritance as sons. The number of Sharia courts, also known as Sharia councils, in Britain has grown to 85 since the first began operating in the country in 1982. It says Muslims from across Europe and North America are increasingly turning to Britain's Sharia courts, we're a world leader in something, folks, which operate as an informal body issuing religious rulings on marriage and family life. About 100,000 Islamic marriages are believed to have been conducted in Britain, many of which are not officially registered with the civil authorities. Now, Sharia, as defined in an official review by a theologian, is based around jurisprudence on the opinions of jurists during the classic period of Islam, regarded as being between the 7th century until the 13th, the time of Muhammad. We're in 2024, about to be in 2025, and we're now harking back to the 7th and 13th century in Britain, and we're saying we're a world leader in this. Many aspects of Sharia have been modified in most Muslim countries, but in marriage and divorce, the classical rulings are often observed. Sharia courts consist of a panel of Islamic scholars who are almost always male, no shit Sherlock, have the religious authority to end these marriages at the request of a wife if her husband is unwilling to grant a divorce. And one of the most prominent of such courts was founded by a radical preacher whose teachings were branded misogynistic by Dame Sarah Khan in her counter-extremism report, landmark report. And he said in online lectures about why marriages fail, a man should not be questioned why he hit his wife because this is something between them. Leave them alone. They can sort out their matters among themselves. He told The Times that he was not teaching that men should not be questioned about smacking their wives. He was explaining the importance of preserving marriages. I'll let you decide your interpretation of those particular remarks. Women describe how men exploit religious texts to exert control over them in the form of coercive control. The hadiths, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, are quoted to insist wives must agree to have sex with their husbands and to claim that women's minds are deficient. One woman was so distressed when an elder suggested she should enter into a religious-sanctioned pleasure marriage, which allows couples to have sex and then part. Baroness Cox, a former nurse and academic and crossbencher member of the House of Lords, had tried to get a private members' bill passed protecting women from religiously sanctioned discrimination under what she called the rapidly developing alternative quasi-legal system of Sharia. Theresa May, as Home Secretary, commissioned an independent review which suggested a government regulator so the councils could have a code of practice. Why? This is the fucking problem. The appeasement is just across the piece, right? The bended knee. We should just say Sharia courts do not exist in the United Kingdom, outlaw them, and move on that and say that goodbye. The Conservative government refused, saying Sharia law had no jurisdiction and that regulation might present the councils as an alternative for British law. Well, they are already, as this article states, acting as an alternative to British law under the radar. Nick Timothy, a Tory MP who was May's chief of staff, suggested that the Sharia review called on the Equality and Human Rights Commission to investigate the councils. Sharia marriages, he says, should be criminalised if they are conducted without the protections of an accompanying civil marriage. And I could go on and on and on. This article just lists through them all in large number. And it should be remembered, it says, that Sharia councils only exist because Muslim women need them to obtain a religious divorce. Muslim men do not need them because they can unilaterally divorce their wife. That's right, any regulation or accommodation of such a body would legitimise this inherently discriminatory outlook on divorce and gender relations. Britain 2024. The UK, the Western capital of Sharia courts. Younes, I've got to let you come in on that first of all.
Yeah, so I have a few things to say about this. So first of all, I don't even know why this is allowed. I thought it was the law of the land that's supposed to be supreme. The fact that we have Sharia courts in the UK is just beyond comprehension. Secondly, the Sharia courts just impose Islamic law. So in Islam, a man can have 4 different wives, but he can also have unlimited sires. I don't know what they call it in English, but in Farsi, sira. And sira is a temporary wife. So basically, it's a way that they legalized prostitution. So you can have a sire for a week, or you can have it for an hour, or you can have it for as long as you want. So and then there's also this other thing called concubines, because, you know, when Muhammad invaded certain countries, he said that the women of those lands are permissible to his soldiers. So you can have unlimited sex slaves if you want. So that's one part. The second part is that in Sharia, women are not allowed to divorce the husband. The husband can only divorce the wife. And what they get in return is something called a mehriye. So when you get married in Islam, you can give a mehriye of £100 or £100,000 or £1 million, but whatever. The husband has to pay that to the wife if he wants to divorce her. That's why she doesn't have a right to divorce him. It's only him that can choose. And lastly, I just, the laws of Sharia are just not compatible. Oh, this is a very important point that you have to remember. The reason why they get married in Sharia courts is that on paper, they are not registered couple. On paper, they're not married. So a woman can be married to a guy and have children with him, but on paper, she's a single mom. So then she can go and, claim child benefits, so on and so forth. So this is very, very important. And this should be outlawed in this country. Yeah. Honestly, the fact that it even exists is beyond comprehension. Not to mention that, Sharia laws that are so outdated and so barbaric, but also for the fact that, people take advantage of the system.
Chloe, I mean, how does it make you feel? I hate to use this identity, but your gender identity, I don't believe in such a thing, your sex.
How could you assume, Darren?
Yes, I did. But how does it make you feel as a woman, this goes on in Britain?
I mean, this is terrifying, right? I mean, I do not want people on the streets of Britain that believe in Sharia law. Is it called Sharia or Sharia? How do you pronounce it? Sharia. Sharia. And, I saw a horrible video the other day of a young woman being beaten up by a huge group of men with sticks and whatnot. And I can't remember what country it is, because she had, not pleasured her husband correctly in bed. And it's absolutely terrifying. You do not want this happening in Britain. And, we and, others on the right, we've been banging on about the problem of people not integrating with our culture in this country. But now I'm like, hang on. Forget that. How about integrating with our law and accepting our law rather than wanting to bring Sharia law to Britain? I mean, I just cannot believe this. I mean, it is terrifying. You know, the idea that we'd be living in a society where one group of people are adhering to one set of laws, to English law, and then you've got sects of society that just have their own, you know, terrifying Sharia law. I mean, what on earth? I mean, how on earth is this even allowed in Britain? And I just looked up, I remember the Henry Jackson Society a survey of British Muslims that was done early on in the war, asking their views on Hamas, but it also asked about their views on Sharia law. And 32% of British Muslims favour Sharia law. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
That, to me, the idea that there are that many people living in this country who want this. I mean, this is so backwards. It's medieval. It is completely, there is no way that you can say, oh, you know, it's just different cultures. We live in multiculturalism. Like, yeah, okay, you know, I don't mind if there are Spaniards making paella in Britain. Okay, that's an example of culture that is compatible with ours. But there are some parts of different cultures which are absolutely, completely conflicting with our values of freedom in the UK. And Sharia law is definitely not compatible. This has to end. But Keir Starmer won't. Okay, he wants the Muslim vote. He will not mention this story. Okay, he's going to be silent on this. I can tell you that right now. Obviously, this story's just come out. Do not expect any statement or tweet from him on this. He is going to be quiet as a mouse. In fact, wouldn't be surprised if MP Tahir Ali makes a stand up in Parliament and makes a speech talking about how great these Sharia courts are and how Keir Starmer should bolster their rights and importance.
And the Chloe raises the key point here. Stephen's commented saying that this brings shame upon the UK. How on earth have politicians allowed this to happen? This goes back to Blair and Cameron, two of the worst prime ministers ever. And I would agree with those sentiments. But Alex, the point that Chloe made there on the politics of it, really. We have a new party that's going to be formed in the new year based around religious sectarianism, headed by Corbyn potentially. And we've seen cousin marriage defended in the House of Commons. We've seen this story here about the UK being the Western capital for Sharia courts. It all paints a trend where elections and politics are going to be fought out along religious lines increasingly, where those who are either secular or Christian are vehemently opposed to what I would argue is a medieval regression to a time when women didn't have rights and British values certainly weren't what they are today.
Yeah, well, you'd be right in suggesting that, Darren. Unfortunately, it is a damning set of principles for women in this country. It sets women's rights back, as you said, hundreds of years to medieval times. This is not 2024 Britain. This is stuff we dealt with as a culture, as a society, hundreds of years ago. The same thing for first cousin marriages. We dealt with that issue quite a long time ago, at least the decades ago, at least almost 100 years ago. We are picking up regressive cultural and religious habits that we should not be having to discuss in Britain in our modern era. It's absolutely insane. And if I can say one thing about this, just one thing, is that there is only one law in this country, and it's British law. If you don't like British law, you don't like our laws on marriage, you don't like our laws on our values and our ideology, then go somewhere that does.
Yeah.
Because we don't want this in our country. We don't want it here. The British public told people like Blair and Cameron and every successive uni-party prime minister since that they want less of this in Britain. They want less of it. They are so angry that we left one of the world's largest political unions, the EU, as a result of many of these issues arising. When will they listen to the British public? Because I'm telling you now, I don't want Elon Musk to be right when he said that the only way this is going to be resolved is through a civil war. But I'm starting to sincerely believe if something doesn't change, he will be spot on. And I do not want that for this country.
We've got a couple of super chats in.
Can I just
Younes,
make
sorry,
one last comment regarding
Yeah.
the picture?
Mhm.
So it says Sharia, the solution for the East and West. So my question is, why did you immigrate here then? If Sharia law worked in your countries, in your societies, then why did you immigrate to the UK? Sharia clearly didn't work in your societies, and now you're bringing that virus here. And I'm just thinking, how stupid do you have to be not to get that? You immigrated from a country that had Sharia law, you escaped that country, and now you're trying to bring it here. And it's just beyond stupid. And it just shows you how brainwashed some of these Muslims are, you know?
I
Yeah.
think that a lot of them, that they haven't recognized the link between Sharia law and these extremist regimes and poverty, right? They've come to the UK not because they like our culture, but because, you know, we're a richer country, a cleaner country, you know, it's nicer, the houses are nicer and whatnot. We're not perfect. We do have a cost of living crisis, but it is a heck of a lot nicer here than a lot of other countries. But they haven't really realised that if you try to bring your culture here and you put Britain under Sharia law, then, you know, we'll probably end up pretty poor as well. And it will end up like the country that you've
but
come
it's
from.
all connected. I think the economy is interconnected with your society. So if you have a strong
absolutely.
economy, then you have a good culture to go with it. You know, and the reason why these countries fail is because they don't have a culture that supports a good economy.
Stephen has sent a couple of super chats, which is very kind of
Very
him,
kind.
because this video will undoubtedly be demonetized now because we're discussing this issue. So your support really does help. And Stephen says, I also believe that the best thing for this country is Nigel Farage. Darren, as a fellow Geordie, do you think reform is the way forward? And he says, hi, Chloe. Stephen, I absolutely do. But Stephen has another question, which is just to say, Britain needs to become more comfortable in being patriotic. And I absolutely do agree with that. And Chloe is looking beautiful tonight, which is very nice.
Always.
It's the Santa
Always.
hat, of course. You guys would
Exactly.
get, Younes and Alex, you'd get more compliments on your looks if you had Santa hats on, I'm just saying.
Maybe
Paul
next
had-
week.
about
Maybe
it.
next week. I think
Oh,
next
next week it's Christmas. We won't be on next week.
Oh, you're not on next week? Okay. good.
No, Paul says, as a gay man, I certainly am worried about this religion becoming the actual law, as then I'm and many others legally legitimate targets. And I agree with that. I mean, you mentioned the Henry Jackson Society, Chloe. I happen to know that they have security because they are not safe, because they talk about these issues. There have been threats to certain broadcasters. And, you know, it's getting bad. It's getting bad.
And underneath it, it says democracy, go to hell.
Yes,
I mean,
it does.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. Woo!
Woo!
Too
right.
late. We're already living in hell. Welcome to Labour Britain. It's about as hot as it gets.
Exactly. Since this
I'm
is
just
the
thinking,
last...
why is it women there protesting? Why is it not men there protesting? I mean, just from the looks of all these laws, it seems
Brainwashing.
like
It's
it's all the
brainwashing.
men that benefit
Yeah.
and the women
It's a
just
brain
get
virus.
abused. I don't know. I know.
Since it's the last stream of the year, so we just want to say a very quick thank you to everyone who supports the channel, watches the streams, watches the videos, and supports in any way that you can. Christine, by the way, says, guys, you are good looking, and supporting us, because it's enabled us to keep doing what we do. So thank you very much. It's just small little channel broadcasting from our homes. So thank you very much to that. And Oxon Steve says, what a fine contributor the gentleman in the cardigan is. Are you wearing a cardigan, Younes? It's
No,
a
I'm
hoodie.
wearing
A hoodie.
It's a hoodie.
His name is Younes. You can look in the YouTube description and his name should be there. He's on Instagram and OnlyFans. No, I'm joking.
Probably is if we look them up.
So the Times posted this article, the very best pictures of 2024, and I thought I've thought about this, and going into 2025, you know, I think the Trump election victory, despite what happened to him, which I wouldn't wish on my own worst enemy, the Trump election victory and that picture in itself, I think is one of the most iconic things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I also think
Absolutely.
that he winning was a
Monumental.
injection to the arm of hope and optimism for the Western world. And I know that everything we've discussed on this stream tonight seems like we are filled with foreboding and the very depths of despair. But there are things to be positive about. There are signs that the West will not go down without at least fighting. And that gives me hope. That inspires me to continue doing what I do, to make videos, to do broadcasts, to post on social media, because it comes with consequences. All of these things come with consequences.
Yeah, they do.
But it gives me hope, and that man gives me hope, actually. So say what you want about the man, but, phenomenal picture. And that, to me, is the picture of the year. That, to me, is the picture, the defining picture of 2024. But... any thoughts and reflections from any of you on as the year draws to a close?
Yeah. Well, he's also named Times Person of the Year.
Yeah.
So that's good. And
Did you see that, the comeback of the century, and then you've got the mugshot next to the Time of the Year Person Award. I mean, absolutely amazing what he's done.
What I learned from this is that, when he got shot and then he stood up and said, fight, fight, fight. The metaphoric lesson you have to learn from that in life, don't ever give up. If you truly believe in something and if you feel like you're saying the truth, and even if the forces of evil are against you, never give up, keep going. And I think that Donald Trump is almost an embodiment of that. So I salute him, and I really look forward to his presidency.
I was listening to Elon speaking on some podcast or whatever the other day, saying that it was that moment. It was the moment that Trump got shot that he decided, right, I'm going to fund this guy's campaign, because you really see that is the ultimate. People can do their acting and whatnot at other speeches, but you are going to see the real, when someone gets shot in the ear like that and you see that reaction, this is not a soft guy. This guy is a real fighter. And so Elon knew right then and there, this guy has got the tenacity and the strength to go far, and he really, really genuinely cares about what he does. So yeah, I think it's I went when I woke up in the morning. I didn't stay up all night for the Trump election, but when I woke up in the morning and saw that he had got in, I cried tears of joy. I was so happy, because it just gave me hope that the West may be saved. We will hopefully not all be living under Sharia law in the next few years.
And Alex, 2025, the fight back could begin in Britain as well.
Well, I was going to say, as a slight sort of change from the topic of Trump, one of the highlights for me this year was Reform getting their first 5 MPs, Nigel Farage becoming a member of Parliament. This is a groundbreaking moment for Britain to have Nigel in the House of Commons, despite all the ridicule he received for attempting to do it before, of course. And also, it's meant that we now have somebody in Parliament that is really standing up for real people, as opposed to the same old with the Uni Party, which is what we would have today. I think if it wasn't for Nigel Farage winning those seats and Reform getting those seats, the British public's faith in our democracy would be absolutely destroyed. It's given us some hope.
Point. That is a very good point.
And
it's been a crazy year. It's
4
been
million people, voted for Reform,
year.
And I think that while that continues and we continue that momentum into 2025, we're seeing, Reform coming to its almost highs of highs the last few months, and I think the Labour Party are doing incredible justice in exposing themselves as well as exposing the Conservative Party. So it's a very, very. I think it's going to be a fantastic year for 2025, Darren.
Well, that's a very good, cheery note. I do have
Alex,
to ask
we've
you
got a request in the comments for your accent, your Trump accent.
Stephen says, come on, Alex, do your best Trump. Say how great 2025 is going to be.
2025, it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be a huge year, I think, Darren. I don't know about Chloe, but I think your hat's exceptionally nice. In fact, they told me 2025 is going to be the year. They said that to me, okay? They said, 25, we're going to help Nigel. We got to help Nigel. We got to save Britain. That's what we're going to do.
Okay, that was as good as it gets.
That was so good.
A little bit rusty.
Completely off the cuff. Love it.
All
stay
right,
good.
guys. On that very cheery note, I think that's a perfect time to end proceedings. So thank you to each of you for being contributors to Reasoned and to being part of this live for however long it's been going on for. And obviously to everyone who watches and supports Reasoned. And let's continue the fight in 2025. We'll see you then. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Oh, yes, Merry
Merry
Christmas. I
Christmas,
didn't even
everyone.
say
Merry
that, did
Christmas.
I? Merry
Yeah,
Christmas,
good
of
shout.
course. That's the whole point. Merry Christmas.